Hi, my name is Misha Miller with the Washoe County School District 21st Century Learning Division, and I'm here today to talk about real-world problem solving and innovation. Our goals for this webinar are to take a more in-depth look at the dimension real-world problem solving and innovation, and to explore what each of those competencies could look like in your classroom. By now you're quite familiar with our planning guide for 21st century learning, and you can see how real-world problem solving and innovation is just one of the 6 dimensions for 21st century learning. So why should students work on real-world problem solving and innovation? Problem-solving tasks abound in today's workplace. Complex problem-solving tasks might include finding new ways to reach global markets or redesigning products to take advantage of newly invented materials. But simpler, everyday problem-solving tasks also require a set of skills that have been undervalued in traditional learning activities. The ability to generate and test creative ideas to solve problems within real, not artificial, requirements and constraints is the crux of knowledge work in the 21st century. On this slide, you can see 2 images. One is a global problem of clean water for everyone, and the other is a problem that resulted in the innovation of a self-driving car. So then what is real-world problem solving and innovation? In traditional academic settings, problems are often thought of as opportunities for students to practice specific learned procedures. For instance, traditional math problems focus on students' ability to replicate techniques that have been explicitly taught. These can be important skills, but they do not help students develop the ability to define and create solutions to the less well-defined problems they will encounter in the workplace. Problems that provide students with opportunities to innovate solutions to real-world problems should not therefore focus on specific procedures students have already learned. Developing problem-solving and innovation skills requires that we ask students to complete tasks for which they don't already have a response or solution. In sum, problem-solving and innovation are thinking skills, not procedural skills. So how to plan instruction that includes opportunities for students to innovate and solve real-world problems? Well, instruction that provides problem-solving opportunities for students requires tasks with a defined challenge for students. These challenges may be defined by the teacher or the student and come in 3 flavors. Tasks with a defined challenge ask students to develop solutions to problems that are new to them, or complete a task they have not been instructed on how to do, or design a complex product that meets a set of requirements. To meet these challenges through problem solving and innovation requires students to consider some or all of the following elements. Investigate the parameters of the problem, develop ideas and alternatives, devise an approach to solving the problem, or explore possible procedures that might be appropriate to this situation, design a coherent solution, test the solution and seek feedback, and improve the solution to better satisfy the requirements of the problem through repeated iterations. For the teacher, the key consideration when developing learning activities that prompt students to develop problem-solving and innovation skills is to not provide students with everything they need. Not provide students with everything they need. Teachers should purposely not provide students with sufficient information to complete a task. They should not specify an entire procedure students should follow to arrive at a solution. Problem solving and innovation are about finding or deriving the necessary information and developing or selecting appropriate procedures. Thus, the teacher should provide carefully scaffolded supports to students that are focused on the process of problem solving and avoid providing answers, directions, or specific procedures. So for the first competency level, you want to ask the question, is the learning activity's primary purpose problem solving? A learning activity's primary purpose is problem solving when it meets all of the following three criteria. Students are given a defined challenge or define their own challenge. The teacher does not provide students with everything they need to undertake the learning activity. And students should commit substantial effort to create a viable solution to a problem. Some things to think about are the teacher's approach to providing appropriate support to students during students' efforts to solve problems will determine the extent to which students effectively solve the problem they are considering. Being too quick to teach can be a detriment to students' learning in this case. Teachers who avoid telling by carefully scaffolding supports to students' thinking processes, permitting students to pursue solutions that the teacher knows will not work, and providing students with access to multiple sources of feedback through the process will be better at helping students develop problem-solving abilities. So an example of what this might look like is when I taught at Clayton Pre-AP Academy, the parking lot was redone, and the outcome of that parking lot was that the parking spaces were way too small. And even if everyone parked within the lines, it was too difficult to exit your vehicle without your car door hitting the car next to yours. So knowing that, a task for students could be to redesign the parking lot to allow for maximum amount of cars, but parking spaces need to be large enough so that your car door doesn't hit the car next to yours when you open it. So notice that there aren't any defined steps with this task, so you can have students groups approach this problem in lots of different ways. You might have some students that start by measuring the lot and current parking space widths, but you might have others that start going to other parking lots and measuring to see whether the width of their spaces. So the openness of the problem allows for student groups to approach the problem in lots of different ways. If we elevate to the next competency level, we want to ask ourselves if students are working on a substantial real-world problem. Real-world problems deal with issues that exist outside a classroom environment. Real-world problems must have all of the following characteristics. They are experienced by real people. The problem must actually exist in the real world and affect real people. They have potential solutions that affect a specific audience other than the teacher. They have specific, explicit contexts rather than general contexts. Specific contexts allow for solutions that could be applied in a specific context. Some things to think about with this competency are: in creating solutions to real-world problems, students should use real-world information and data. This could include the student's creation or collection of their own data through an appropriate process, and/or their selection and analysis of others' research. So if we come back to our example of Clayton's parking lot, so we already have the task is to redesign the parking lot to allow for maximum amount of cars, but parking spaces that are large enough so that your car door doesn't hit the car next to you when you open it. How we can take that then to an authentic audience is that the Clayton Pre-AP staff will vote on the best design. So they're going to redesign, and the staff is going to vote on the best design or plan. So notice that one of the things too was that students, when they're working on that problem, are using actual data. So when students are tackling this, some groups might create a Google form and collect the data from teachers on the make and model of each of their cars to determine the parking space width needed. Some might go to the internet and look up average width of cars, trucks, and SUVs and just use that data to decide on the width that's needed. But the key is that they're collecting their own authentic data. If we continue to elevate, we'll reach the competency for innovation. And the question that you're asking yourself then is, does this activity require innovation? Do students have to create a product, method, or idea that is new to the student? And innovation has two main components, both of which must be present in a learning activity. First, innovation requires that students put their ideas or solutions into practice in the real world, or communicate these ideas and solutions to others with the ability to implement them. For instance, students who design and build a community garden for a local senior center are innovating, whereas students who just design the garden are not. Students who design the garden and present the plans to the senior center leadership are innovating. Second, innovation must benefit others. To benefit others, the learning activity must create a real-world solution that has potential value beyond the requirements of the learning activity. For example, designing a community garden has no value to others unless the garden is actually considered by others for building. So some things to think about with this competency is, when creating learning activities, a broad interpretation should be taken of the requirement of putting solutions into practice in the real world to benefit others. For instance, it also counts as innovation if students submit a written piece to a literature contest, because these contests are not teacher controlled and they have real world audiences who are interested in and may benefit from the students' work. So going back to our example, Clayton's parking lot task, the task hasn't changed. To take it to the next level, we had an audience. The Clayton Pre-AP staff will vote on the best design plan. And now for innovation, the winning design will carry out their plan to improve the functionality of the parking lot. So the key is putting the ideas into practice. Some final thoughts on real-world problem solving and innovation. Our communities are improved by those who innovate to solve problems that exist in the real world. We're all engaged in some way in the work of implementing solutions, from garbage collection to security for online banking. The work of creating solutions, however small, to improve our lives is why real-world problem solving and innovation are important 21st century skills. Increasingly, we see examples of K-12 students who are addressing real-world problems and coming up with solutions with the potential to benefit a real audience. Students with more opportunities to grapple with real-world problems are more likely to be engaged in the work of developing viable solutions. It seems important, therefore, that teachers create learning activities that provide students with the opportunity to solve real-world problems and create products, methods, and ideas that are new to them. It may be helpful for you to take a look at the Real-World Problem Solving and Innovation Elevator Guide that's linked here. It is basically the transcript of this webinar in addition to concrete examples of learning activities for each competency. Thank you.